So next, we are going to a new topic, that is adipose tissue metabolism. We have been discussing on the fatty acid metabolism. Then we have dealt with the significance of polyunsaturated fatty acids, what are eicosanoids, what is the importance of eicosanoids in the body, etc. Right. So next topic connecting to this fatty acids are the adipose tissue metabolism. So what is adipose tissue? It's adipose tissue is nothing but a type of connective tissue, right? So this connective tissue can be present in between the peripheral tissue and also the uh, or peripheral fat and the fat which is present on the surface of the organs. So these type of connective tissues are known as adipose tissue, right? So these are the various sites where you can see the adipose tissue, right? So the adipose tissue will be rich in areas like thighs, the buttocks, right? Then abdomen, etc. The fat content എവിടെയൊക്കെ കൂടുതലുണ്ട് അവിടെയൊക്കെ we can see the adipose tissue, because the adipose tissue is a site where the fats are deposited. So wherever you can have the fat storage, those sites we call it as adipose tissue. So we know that when we were discussing on the carbohydrate metabolism, we have studied that excess of the glucose molecules are stored in the form of glycogen, right? So that's the storage form of carbohydrates. Glucose cannot be simply stored, they are monosaccharides, so they will be converted into the polymeric form or polysaccharides, and the homopolysaccharide which is present in the body in the storage form of glucose is known as glycogen, and glycogen is mainly stored in the liver and also in the skeletal muscles, right? So these are the storage sites of glycogen. Similarly, fats also are stored in the body because they are the immediate source of energy after the glucose or glycogen. So whenever the glycogen store is depleted, then immediately the body depends on fats for the energy purposes. Of course, there are a lot of functions carried out by fats in the body, not only the energy production, but one of the most important functions of the fat is the production of energy, right? They can immediately bring about energy. They can bring about ATP. We have studied again the amount of energy, the number of ATPs produced by a fatty acid oxidation is much higher when compared to that of a single molecule of glucose, right? That is around 32 ATPs are produced when one molecule of glucose is undergoing aerobic glycolysis. Like TCA cycling when glucose is undergoing complete oxidation, we get only around 32 ATPs. While when a single molecule of fat is oxidized, beta oxidation it's around 10 times. That is 130 number of around approximately 130 number of ATPs can be produced by a single molecule of fatty acids. So that's the power of a fatty acid, right? അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ body will be conserving the fats in the body, and the storage site or conservation site or the depot fats are seen in the adipose tissue, right? The fats are stored in the areas like the main storage site is adipose tissue and also the liver. Of course, almost all the organs can store fat. The primary organs of storage site of fat is the liver and the adipose tissue. And again, the function of the fat stored in the adipose tissue is to produce energy. Energy production is the function of fat stored in the adipose tissue. Now we call it as the storage form of glucose is glycogen. Now what is the case with fatty acids? The storage form of fat is known as triacyl glycerol, TG. So TG is the storage form of fat. So glucose is the storage form, glycogen is the storage form of glucose. Similarly, the storage form of fat is TG, and this TG can be abundantly seen in the adipose tissue and also the liver. Of course, almost all the tissues are having TG in it, or a TG stored in them, but the primary site of fat storage is the adipose tissue. അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ തടിച്ച ആൾക്കാര് എന്തുകൊണ്ട് when do we call a person to be fat? എന്തുകൊണ്ട് എപ്പോഴാണ് നമ്മൾ ഒരാളെ ഫാറ്റ് എന്ന് പറയാ? Because they will be having fatty content in them more when compared to that of a lean person, right? And where is the fat stored? These fats, excess of fats are stored mainly in the adipose tissue and also in the liver. ലിവറിൽ വെക്കുന്നതിന് ഒരു പരിധിയുണ്ട്, ബട്ട് ആഡിപ്പോസ് ടിഷ്യൂല് ഒരുപാട് ഫാറ്റ്സിനെ നമുക്ക് സ്റ്റോർ ചെയ്യാനായിട്ട് പറ്റും. Clear. Now we are going to study the adipose tissue metabolism. How is we know that the fat stored in the adipose tissue, that is the TG stored in the adipose tissue, is meant for the production of energy. So how is the energy produced, or how are TG synthesized and catabolized in the adipose tissue? That will be dealing in the adipose tissue metabolism. So adipose tissue metabolism is very important because whenever there is a depletion of glucose കുറയുമ്പോൾ immediately the body depends on the depot fat, DEPOT, depot fat, or the neutral fat. അതാണ് the triacyl glycerol. Depot fat means nothing but triacyl glycerol, that is the fat stored in the adipocytes, right, or neutral fat. Right, so this TG will be always stored in the body. Even if the body is having excess of glucose, ഒരുപാട് മധുരം കഴിച്ചാലും excess of glucose, there will be almost all the glucose will be converted into glycogen, but again the glycogen storage of glycogen is again limited, so excess of glucose will be converted into fat, right? That is acetyl CoA then enters into fatty acid biosynthesis. Clear? അപ്പോൾ excess ആയിട്ട് എന്ത് ബയോമോളിക്യൂൾ വന്നാലും they will be utilized by the body effectively, right? And if there is excess quantities of glucose which cannot be utilized by the body, right, if the body is tired of, if exhausted of producing glycogen, then immediately the synthesis of fatty acid will be initiated, that is glucose will be converted into fats. Clear? Again, glucose is undergoing oxidation to give rise to acetyl CoA, but this acetyl CoA then നമുക്ക് എനർജിയുടെ ആവശ്യമൊന്നുമില്ല എന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ എന്ത് ചെയ്യും, TCA cycle അവിടെ സ്റ്റോപ്പ് ആവും. മറിച്ച് എന്നിട്ട് acetyl CoA then enters into the synthesis of fat, right? We know that again the fatty acid biosynthesis starts with the acetyl CoA. Clear? So the fats will be synthesized, fatty acids will be synthesized. This fatty acids will be then stored in the form of triacyl glycerol, or it is also known as neutral fat, or it is also known as depot fat. So where is this? Where are these fats or fatty acids stored, or this triacyl glycerol stored? They are stored mainly in the adipose tissue and also in the liver. Even though all the tissues of the body can have TG, in the that is the fats can be stored, even though almost all the organs can store fats in the form of TG, the main tissues which are responsible for storing the fats is the adipose tissue and also the liver. So today we are having adipose tissue metabolism. See, so these are the adipose tissues, right? These cream color, this flesh colored cells are known as adipose tissue, right? Again, the adipocytes. So these are this red color things are the blood vessels, right? And these are so this is a blood vessel, right? So in the blood vessels you can have the adipocytes also, right? So it might be a tissue, any organ, so the organ will be having the adipose tissue on it, and the blood supply will be there. And apart from these, so the blood vessels, again the blood contains what? RBCs, WBCs, platelets, etc., right? So this is a blood vessel which is supplying the organ. So in the organ there will be having adipocytes on them, and the adipocytes contain numerous other types of cells also that we are going to discuss. Okay, so these are the adipose. So this is the adipose tissue. Suppose this is an adipose tissue. So adipose tissue will be rich in adipocytes. Apart from adipocytes, there are other cells like pre-adipocytes. Then there are the macrophages, leukocytes, monocytes, then there will be blood supply. Okay, so adipose tissue is like any other organ, but the main function of adipose tissue is to store fats in the form of triacyl glycerol. Okay, so these are the areas where you can see the adipose tissue in the higher quantities when compared to the other areas, like these are areas known as the white adipose tissue. That's why it is pale color la കൊടുത്തിരിക്കുന്നത്. Okay, so there is the abdomen is there, then there's the thighs, right? Thigh, തൊടകൾ, right? Then there is the buttocks, right? So these are the areas where mainly the adipose tissue can be seen in huge amounts or large amounts. Okay, so why are the fats stored in the body? Because the main reason is that glycogen is a hydrophilic molecule. So when glycogens are synthesized, or when glucose is undergoing polymerization to give rise to glycogen, along with the glucose molecules, the glycogen molecule also traps water molecules into it, right? So that the space is consumed by the water molecule rather than the glucose. So if you take 1 gram of glycogen, it will be having a significantly large amount of water molecules also. Glucose you can see water molecules also with it. So glucose water trap. So the space has been consumed by water, right? Above, there's a wastage of space, right? So in order to prevent that, what has happening along with glycogen, the excess of the glucose will be converted into fats, because fats are lipophilic in nature or they're hydrophobic in nature, so they will always repel water away from them. So 1 gram of lipid, like 1 gram of TG or 1 gram of fat, you can see only fat in it. If you have the same quantity of glycogen, you can see that if you are taking 1 gram of glycogen and 1 gram of TG, you can see the glycogen is having water molecules along with the glucose molecules, while the 1 gram of fat contains only fat, right? So അത്ര പോലും സ്പേസ് നമുക്ക് സേവ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റും, റൈറ്റ്? അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് എക്സസ് ഓഫ് ഗ്ലൂക്കോസ് ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ കൂടി ഗ്ലൈക്കോജന്റെ ഫോർമേഷൻ കഴിഞ്ഞു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ റിമൈനിങ് വിൽ ബി converted into the form of fats. So whenever the energy is required, these fats can be undergoing catabolism and can produce energy. അപ്പം അത് ബോഡിയുടെ ഒരു മെക്കാനിസം ആണ്. സോ ദാറ്റ് വരണ എല്ലാ എനർജി സോഴ്സുകളിൽ നിന്നും they are conserved. ബോഡി എപ്പോഴും കൺസേർവ് ചെയ്ത് വെക്കും. ദാറ്റ് ഇസ് ഇൻ ഫ്യൂച്ചർ ഇഫ് ദ നീഡ് അറൈസസ് അവരെയൊക്കെ നമുക്ക് പുറത്തേക്ക് എടുക്കാൻ പറ്റും. അതല്ലെങ്കിൽ തന്നെ ഡെയിലി ബേസിസിൽ തന്നെ അഡിപ്പോസ് ടിഷ്യൂവിലുള്ള TG വിൽ ബി അണ്ടർഗോയിങ് മൊബിലൈസേഷൻ, റൈറ്റ്? ഗ്ലൂക്കോസ് ആവശ്യത്തിനുണ്ടെങ്കിലും TG വൺസ് ഡെപ്പോസിറ്റ് ചെയ്ത് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ അത് അവിടെ ഇങ്ങനെ മടിയായിട്ട് ഇരിക്കില്ല. ഇറ്റ്സ് നോട്ട് റിമൈനിങ് ലേസി, റൈറ്റ്? ഇറ്റ് വിൽ ബി കംപ്ലീറ്റ്ലി മൊബിലൈസ്ഡ്. എപ്പോഴും യൂസപ്പ് ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടേയിരിക്കും. ഒരു കംപ്ലീറ്റ് ടേൺ ഓവർ എപ്പോഴും നടന്നുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കും. മറ്റേ ബേസൽ റേറ്റ്. ഓക്കെ, സോ വൺസ് സ്റ്റോർ ചെയ്ത് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ അവിടെ ഇരിക്കും എന്നുള്ള, കാലാകാലം അത് അവിടെ ഇരിക്കും എന്നുള്ളതല്ല അർത്ഥം. അഡിപ്പോസ് ടിഷ്യൂന്ന് എപ്പോഴും TGനെ മൊബിലൈസ് ചെയ്ത് അതിനെ യൂസപ്പ് ചെയ്ത് പോകും. സോ ദാറ്റ് ഫ്രഷ് TG molecules will be always entering into the adipose tissue. Clear? So what are the important roles of adipose tissue? It is mainly used up for the production of energy, then food intake behavior, right? That is it. Whenever there is a the TG content is lowered, what happens? We'll be having hungry, right? So ഭക്ഷണം കഴിക്കണോ വേണ്ടോ എന്നൊക്കെ തീരുമാനിക്കുന്ന adipose tissue പ്രത്യേക type of hormone like substances ഉണ്ട്, like leptin, then adiponectin എന്നൊക്കെ പറഞ്ഞാൽ hormone like substances are produced by adipose tissue. Energy production മാത്രമല്ല adipose tissue function. I have already told you one of the major functions is to produce energy, but other than that it is having various other functions like thermal insulation. അല്ലേ? തടിച്ച ആൾക്കാർക്ക് കുറച്ചും കൂടി കോൾഡിനെ സർവൈവ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റും. കാരണം എന്താ? ദ ഫാറ്റ്സ് ആർ ആക്ടിങ് ആസ് ഇൻസുലേറ്റേഴ്സ്. അതുപോലെ വേറെ ഇറ്റ് ക്യാൻ ആക്ട് ആസ് അഡിപ്പോസ് ടിഷ്യൂ ഇസ് മോർ ലൈക്ക് ആൻ എൻഡോക്രൈൻ ഓർഗൻ ആണ്. ഹോർമോൺ പോലെ തന്നെ ഹോർമോൺ ലൈക്ക് സബ്സ്റ്റൻസസ് ആർ പ്രൊഡ്യൂസ്ഡ് ബൈ അഡിപ്പോസ് ടിഷ്യൂ. അതിനെ വിളിക്കുന്ന പേരാണ് ലെപ്റ്റിൻ, നെക്റ്റിൻ എക്സെട്ര. ഈ ലെപ്റ്റിൻ ഒന്നും ആവശ്യത്തിന് ഈ അഡിപ്പോസ് ടിഷ്യൂസ്, ഇഫ് ദ leptin molecules are not produced by adipose tissue in sufficient quantities, then there will be always a craving for food. എപ്പോഴും ഭക്ഷണം കഴിക്കാനുള്ള ഒരു ടെൻഡൻസി ഉണ്ടാക്കും. ആ ടെൻഡൻസിനെ ബാലൻസ് ചെയ്യാന്നുള്ളതാണ് ആരുടെ ഫംഗ്ഷൻ? ലെപ്റ്റിൻ എന്നുള്ള ഹോർമോണിന്റെ ഫംഗ്ഷൻ. ആൻഡ് ദിസ് ലെപ്റ്റിൻ is synthesized by adipose tissue. അപ്പൊ ആവശ്യത്തിന് ഭക്ഷണം കഴിച്ചാൽ then we will stop, because there is a hormone produced by adipose tissue which is known as leptin. അതുപോലെ തന്നെ വേറൊരു ഹോർമോൺ ആണ് അഡിപ്പോനെക്റ്റിൻ. ഇവരൊന്നും പ്രോപ്പർ ആയിട്ട് ഉണ്ടാക്കിയിട്ടില്ലെങ്കിലും, അഡിപ്പോനെക്റ്റിൻ ഒന്നും ഇതുപോലെ ഉണ്ടായിട്ടില്ലെങ്കിൽ, ഇഫ് ദ ബോഡി ഇസ് നോട്ട് സിന്തസൈസിങ് അഡിപ്പോനെക്റ്റിൻ ഇൻ normal quantities, then it can result in diseased conditions, right? Then immunological functions are there. It can produce immunological substances like interleukin 6, അതുപോലെ tumor necrosis factor, right? TNF alpha എന്നുള്ള കുറെ immunological factors synthesize ചെയ്യേണ്ടത്. Then it is involved in reproduction, hematopoiesis, lymphopoiesis, etc. Then what are the types of adipose tissue? There are 3 different types of adipose tissue. We'll come to it: visceral, subcutaneous, and intramuscular. Then there are subtypes: white, brown, and beige. You can first figure you have seen ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞില്ലേ, the pale color ആണ്. So this is white adipose tissue, and apart from that there is another type of tissue which is known as brown adipose tissue. Then there is a third type, beige. Brown and beige are almost the same, right? So there are 2 subtypes of adipose tissue: white adipose tissue and brown, right? Then these are the different types of cells: adipocytes, endothelial cells, fibroblasts, connective tissues, then macrophages, mast cells, dendritic cells. These cells are involved in the immune system, that is protect against the infections. So all these type of cells are found in the adipose tissue apart from adipocytes.